Jerusalem. To the faithful, it is the center of the world, the crossroads where history, prophecy, and the divine have met for thousands of years. It is a city of stone, built to last forever. But minutes ago, the illusion of permanence was shattered, and the eyes of the world are now fixed on the holy city in shock and prayer. The afternoon began like any other in the old city. Pilgrims navigated the narrow limestone corridors. Vendors murmured in the shadows of ancient archways, and the golden sunlight bathed walls that had withstood empires. There was no storm on the horizon. The air was still, but then the ground itself seemed to inhale. It wasn't a catastrophic earthquake that leveled the city. It was something arguably more unsettling, a distinct, sharp hesitation beneath the streets. Witnesses described it not as a rolling wave, but as a vibration that traveled horizontally through the bedrock. In the open prayer areas, devout men and women stopped mid-prayer, their eyes darting upward, expecting to see a low-flying jet or thunderhead. But the sky was clear. Then came the wind. A sudden, inexplicable gust tore through the stone canyons of the old city, whipping dust into spirals that stung the eyes. And just as confusion began to set in, the unthinkable happened at the Western Wall. The Kotel is a holiest site where Jews are permitted to pray, a remnant of the Second Temple complex. It is a symbol of endurance. Yet, minutes after the tremor, a deep grinding sound echoed across the plaza. It wasn't the clatter of loose pebbles. It was a groan of immense weight shifting. A massive ancient stone, weathered by centuries of tears and prayers, detached from the wall. It crashed onto the platform below, sending a plume of gray dust into the air and shattering the silence of the plaza. Screams erupted. Worshippers scrambled back, not just in fear of injury, but in spiritual shock. To see a piece of the Temple Mount fall is not merely a structural failure. To many, it feels like a divine punctuation mark. Emergency crews rushed to scan for stress fractures, and religious leaders called for calm. But as the dust settled, a heavy realization took hold. The tremor was concentrated in the very heart of the city, targeting the sacred quarters while leaving modern suburbs largely untouched. What does it mean when the physical foundations of our faith literally shift beneath our feet? Is this simply geology acting on ancient limestone? Or is the city of Jerusalem trying to tell us something that we have forgotten? As a small thank you for joining us today, we offer a moment of shared blessing. Comment with the word faith if you are open to receiving a special final thought dedicated to everyone participating. And please press like if you appreciate these moments. The falling stone was terrifying enough, but as investigators and the faithful review the footage of those chaotic minutes, they are noticing something else. Something that happened just seconds before the rock gave way. It was fleeting, it was faint, but it was there. And it suggests that the collapse wasn't just about gravity. It was about a presence. The collapse of ancient stone at the Western Wall was a headline, but the real story, the one that is experts and believers alike pausing the footage and holding their breath, is what happened in the margins. It is often said that the devil is in the details, but in Jerusalem, the details might just point to the divine. As the dust cloud billowed over the plaza, investigators began the forensic task of analyzing the moments leading up to the fracture. What they found has shifted the conversation from structural engineering to spiritual mystery. In the background of at least 3 separate videos, recorded just seconds before the stone gave way, a faint anomaly appears. It wasn't a lens flare or a trick of the sun. It was a vertical glow, thin, pale, almost like a column of mist or light, standing quietly behind the upper stones. It lasted for barely 4 seconds. It didn't flash like lightning. It hovered, and then, just as the first grinding sound of rock began, it vanished. While the eyes of the world were fixed on the visible destruction, sensors beneath the city were recording an invisible counterpart. At nearly the exact same moment the light appeared, audio monitoring equipment registered a low-frequency pulse. This wasn't the rumble of traffic or the noise of construction. It was a vibration too deep for the human ear to hear, yet powerful enough to be felt by the earth itself. It was a heartbeat in the limestone, a single, concentrated throb of energy that seemed to signal the stone to release. Witnesses on the ground described a sensation that science struggles to quantify, a sudden, heavy silence. Just before the crash, the ambient noise of the city seemed to flatten. Birds that had been circling overhead abruptly disappeared. scattering as if they sense a shift in the air pressure that humans missed. It was as if the holy city took a sharp intake of breath. For the faithful, it is impossible to watch stones fall in Jerusalem without recalling the words of Jesus as he entered this very city. When the Pharisees told him to rebuke his disciples for their loud praises, he replied with a prophecy that echoes through the ages. In Luke 19, verse 40, Duaremes, he declares, "I say to you that if these shall hold their peace, the stones will cry out." For centuries, we have read that verse as a metaphor. But standing before the fractured masonry of the Temple Mount, we must ask, was this a metaphor becoming reality? When a wall that has stood for generations suddenly sheds its weight after a tremor that barely registered elsewhere, is it a structural failure or is it a cry? This combination of events, the tremor, the light, the pulse, and the collapse, is what some are calling a convergence. Individually, they might be explained away. Together, they form a pattern that feels deliberate. The city wasn't just shaking, it was communicating. But if Jerusalem is speaking, who is listening? As the news rippled out from the epicenter, it didn't just stop at the borders of Israel. It triggered a global reaction that was almost as immediate as the tremor itself. Stay with us, because what happened next in the capitals of the world and in the private prayer rooms of millions reveals that this event was felt far beyond the physical borders of the Middle East. The stones fell in Jerusalem, but the impact was about to be felt in your own backyard. News alerts move at the speed of light, but the spirit of this event traveled even faster. Within 10 minutes of the stone crashing down, Jerusalem was no longer the only city holding its breath. The images of dust rising against ancient limestone were shared across continents before official emergency statements could even be drafted. Commentators struggled to find the right words, speaking over shaky live stream footage. Was it a disaster? A warning? A miracle that no one was crushed? Almost immediately, the tone shifted from curiosity to something far more solemn: prayer. In Rome, candles were lit beneath the dome of St. Peter's Basilica as word reached the faithful. In New York, interfaith leaders gathered in Lower Manhattan for an unscheduled vigil, sensing the weight of the moment. In small congregations across Asia and South America, pastors paused mid-sermon to acknowledge the breaking news. The phrase, "Pray for Jerusalem," didn't just trend on social media. It became a global invocation. Why does this specific city matter so much? Why does a fallen stone in the Middle East cause a farmer in Nebraska or a teacher in London to stop and pray? It is because Jerusalem is not simply a capital on a map. It is the geographic heart of our spiritual history. It is a focal point where the divine has repeatedly touched the earth. When something shifts there, the vibration is felt in the soul of every believer. While the world prayed, the scene on the ground in Jerusalem shifted from chaos to a controlled, almost eerie investigation. Floodlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the fractured section of the Western Wall. Engineers worked in the shadows, marking stress lines in chalk and documenting the damage. Archaeological authorities call for calm, reminding us that ancient structures are fragile. But religious leaders spoke a different language. They didn't speak of erosion or physics. They spoke of a sign. The convergence of these three elements, a tremor with inconsistent readings, a partial collapse of the sacred structure, and those unexplained anomalies captured on camera, created a narrative that felt larger than the sum of its parts. Even financial markets briefly fluctuated, and travel advisories were quietly reviewed. The ripple effect was undeniable. In a rare moment of unity, strangers thousands of miles apart stood together in silence. Synagogues, churches, and mosques opened their doors outside of regular hours. The world, so often divided, momentarily converged in shared concern. But as the night deepened and the rescue lights reflected off the pale limestone, one question echoed louder than any other. It wasn't how this happened. Engineers can explain stress fractures. The question that hung heavy in the air was, why Jerusalem? And why now? This event has moved beyond geology and entered our collective consciousness. And as investigators continue to review the digital evidence, they are faced with a reality that is becoming impossible to ignore. The collapse was just a visible symptom. What is happening underneath the city, and perhaps underneath the surface of our own understanding, is far more complex. Stay tuned, because as the dust settles, a new pattern is emerging. The initial shock is over, but the investigation has uncovered a series of details that suggest this wasn't a random accident, but a specific, targeted message. By nightfall, the dust had settled over the old city, but the questions were only beginning to rise. Floodlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the fractured stone near the western wall. Engineers moved methodically, marking stress lines in chalk and using drones to map the damage from above. On the surface, the official report was clinical: a tremor, a structural failure, and a set of unusual visual anomalies. But history is rarely shaped by isolated data points. It is shaped by convergence. Consider the odds. A tremor that many sensors barely registered. A collapse in one of the most structurally monitored zones in the world. A faint, unexplained glow capture on camera just seconds before impact. Individually, these could be dismissed. But together, occurring within minutes in the spiritual epicenter of the globe, they form a pattern that is difficult for the faithful heart to ignore. As the investigation expanded, it became clear that the Western Wall was not the only site responding to the tremor. Attention shifted eastward, toward the slopes of the Mount of Olives. This ridge is not just a geological feature. It is a stage for the most profound prophecies of the end times. Observers reported hairline fractures appearing in the pathways, small splits in the ground that had not existed earlier in the day. These weren't catastrophic chasms, but they were precise. They appeared away from the eroded burial slopes, emerging instead near the ancient route long associated with the triumphal entry of Jesus. For a believer, standing on the Mount of Olives and seeing the earth crack, however slightly, brings a rush of biblical recognition. We turn to the prophet Zechariah, who foresaw a day when this very mountain will be the focal point of divine intervention. Zechariah 14 verse 4 Duarems declares, "And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is over against Jerusalem toward the east. And the Mount of Olives shall be divided in the midst thereof to the east, and to the west with a very great opening." While the fracture today is small, the location is unmistakable. It is a physical echo of a spiritual promise. But the earth wasn't just cracking. In some places, it was vibrating. Near the sealed eastern gate, often called the Golden Gate, visitors and maintenance staff reported a sensation that defies logic. The massive stone surrounding the sealed entrance, which has been closed for centuries awaiting Messiah, seemed to hum. It was a brief, localized vibration, absent of any seismic confirmation from regional stations. Stones that had been silent witnesses to empires rising and falling were suddenly trembling. Habakkuk 2 verse 11 tells us, "For the stone shall cry out of the wall, and the timber that is between the joints of the building shall answer." When the Golden Gate vibrates and the Mount of Olives fractures, we are being shown that the very geography of Jerusalem is alive with anticipation. These are not accidents of nature. They are the groanings of creation waiting for redemption. If this message resonates deep within you, and you feel moved to affirm your faith right now, simply type "Amen" in the comments below. We have seen the collapse, the light, and the shifting earth. But as the night deepened over the city, the signs moved from the visible to the audible. Residents in the quiet quarters of the old city began to report a sound. Not a siren, not a machine, but something ancient rising from the deep. Stay tuned, because the next chapter explores a mystery that woke the city from its sleep, a sound that many are calling a trumpet from the earth. Long after the sun had set and the initial shock of the tremor had faded, a new phenomenon began to stir within the walls of the old city. This time, it wasn't physical shaking or a visual spectacle. It was a sound. And unlike the sirens of emergency vehicles that had pierced the afternoon air, this sound did not come from the streets. It seemed to rise from beneath them. Residents living in the ancient quarters reported hearing a deep, low tone echoing through the stone corridors well after midnight. It didn't sound like the grinding gears of machinery or the roar of a passing jet. Witnesses described it as steady, hollow, and heavy, resembling a distant trumpet or a ceremonial horn blowing from somewhere deep within the earth. The accounts are remarkably consistent. A night security guard stationed near one of the old gates described the sound as rising from the pavement itself, vibrating through the soles of his boots. A shop owner, sleeping in an apartment above his store, was jolted awake, believing a procession was taking place outside, only to look out at an empty, silent street. A traveler staying near the Armenian quarter felt the vibration more than he heard it, reporting that his window frame trembled slightly as the tone passed through the room. Scientific explanations have been offered, of course. Geologists suggest that the intricate web of ancient tunnels, cisterns, and hollow chambers beneath Jerusalem could be channeling air or settling after the earlier tremor, creating a resonance that mimics a horn. Air rushing through narrow underground passages can indeed produce strange acoustic effects. But for those who heard it, the scientific theory feels thin compared to the visceral experience of the sound itself. In the Bible, the trumpet is never a trivial instrument. It is a signal. It marks the gathering of the people, the warning of an approach, or the call to repentance. The prophet Joel speaks directly to this moment in Joel 2 verse 1. Devarim's, "Blow ye the trumpet in Zion. Sound an alarm in my holy mountain. All the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord cometh, because it is nigh at hand." When a city built on the very history of God's covenant begins to sound its own alarm from the deep, it is a moment that transcends geology. It feels like an awakening. The tremor shook the foundations, the light marked the heavens, and now the earth itself is sounding a note of preparation. This trumpet from the deep lasted only a short time, perhaps less than a minute, but it left a lingering question in the minds of everyone who heard it. If the stones are crying out and the earth is sounding an alarm, what is the next stage of this unfolding message? Stay tuned, because while the physical signs are powerful, the official response to them has been equally revealing. What authorities released next wasn't denial, but a very specific kind of warning that suggests they, too, know that something fundamental has shifted. After the tremor shook the ground, the light pierced the sky, and the trumpet sounded from the deep. The next signal did not come from the elements. It came from the authorities. And while it was quiet, carefully worded and bureaucratic, it carried a weight that every believer needs to understand. Long after the dust had settled near the Western Wall, a specific advisory began to circulate. The U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem issued a message reiterating standard guidance: exercise good personal security practices, remain prepared, review travel plans. On the surface, this is routine diplomatic language. Governments issue these reminders constantly, but in the context of what had just happened, the shaking, the collapse, the unexplained phenomena, the timing transforms the routine into the significant. When officials urge preparedness, immediately following a symbolic event on the Temple Mount, they are acknowledging that the atmosphere has shifted. They are signaling that unpredictability has entered the equation. This advisory didn't predict a crisis. It didn't announce an evacuation or disaster. Instead, it focused on awareness. It encouraged people to look at their surroundings with fresh eyes and to be deliberate in their movements. For the spiritual community, this mirrors a profound biblical principle. We are often looking for the spectacular, the parting of the sea or the fire from heaven, but God often speaks through the call to simple, prudent readiness. Proverbs 22 verse 3 in the Devarim's Bible tells us, "The prudent man saw the evil and hid himself. The simple passed on and suffered loss." The message here is clear. Faith is not blind to danger. Faith is the wisdom to see the signs and prepare accordingly. The embassy's guidance serves as a bridge between the physical events and our response. It reminds us that while we cannot control the tremor or the trumpet, we can control our readiness. This shift from what is happening to what should we do is crucial. The advisory acts as a stabilizer. It calms the panic but heightens the focus. It tells us that we are in a season where we must be awake, watching, and ready for whatever turn the road takes next. To join our community and never miss an inspiring story, consider clicking like and subscribing to the channel. We are committed to bringing you the truth behind the headlines. The authorities have called for physical preparedness. But as we move into our final chapter, we must ask the ultimate question: what about spiritual preparedness? The tremor, the light, the sound, and the warning, they all point to one conclusion. The city of Jerusalem has shifted, and it is inviting the rest of the world to do the same. Stay with us at conclusion, where we bring all these threads together and offer a final challenge to your heart. Finally, our journey through the shifting stones and signals of Jerusalem brings us to the most crucial question of all. We have witnessed the tremor that shook the ancient foundations. We have seen the mysterious light that hovered over the Temple Mount. We have heard the reports of a trumpet-like sound rising from the deep, and we have noted the quiet, serious advisory from authorities urging preparedness. Plus two, individually. Any of these events could be dismissed as a quirk of nature or a coincidence of timing. But together, they form a chorus. The earth is shaking. The sky is marking the moment. The stones are vibrating, and the authorities are warning. Plus three, what is the purpose of all this? Is it to terrify us? No, it is to prepare us. God is shaking the foundations of the world to remind us that this world is not our final home. He is allowing the natural order to bend, stone to fracture, light to hover, sound to rise, so that we might look for the supernatural order that is to come. These signs are not threats. They are invitations. They are the footsteps of the Messiah approaching the door. Plus two, we are not called to live in fear of the shifting earth or the changing sky. We are called to live in the joyful expectation of the one who holds the earth and the sky in his hands. When the physical ground becomes uncertain, it is the perfect time to make sure our spiritual ground is solid. As we conclude on this powerful note of anticipation, we invite you to make a declaration of where your true allegiance lies. If you believe that amidst the shaking of the world, there is one solid rock that will never fail, please comment "Jesus is King" below to affirm this truth with us. And your journey doesn't have to stop here. Click on the video appearing on your screen now for another powerful message we prepared for you.